Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here. You know, most people know me for my Final Fantasy XIV content, but it's far from the only thing I've played. I've spent a lot of time over the years in quite a few MMOs. In my youth, I tried a number of early day Korean MMOs, Silk Road Online, Hero Online, Granada Espada, Mabinagi, Ragnarok Online's 1 and 2, the second 2 anyway, not to mention some more of the well-known MMOs, Final Fantasy XI, Guild Wars 2, WoW, Rift, WildStar, etc. Over the years of content creation then, I've poked my head between a bunch of stuff, Bladen Soul, Lost Ark, Throne and Liberty, etc, etc there. But there's one MMO that I've not dared step into until now. And that MMO is none other than RuneScape. Well, I suppose it's not fair to say I've never dipped my toes in. I tried playing it at a friend's house in my early teens, and his PC ran it so poorly. It took me about an hour to get through Tutorial Island just because of the frame rate, and then I died to a cow early and never played it again. But in the last few weeks, after years of pestering from my stream and Discord chatters, and with the recent surge of the game's popularity, I decided it was time. So I expected to pop in and find a few relatively simple concepts buried beneath a game that has decades of content to actually do. You have a ton of skills, both combat and non-combat, and you explore around the world raising those skills while completing quests. As my chat always said, RuneScape is the number go up game. You just play it and you watch your numbers go up, and it's great. What I instead discovered was a game with lots of little tricks that veterans had discovered and perfected over the years that equal parts gave the game depth and drove some players absolutely crazy, and I had hardly even scratched the surface. So, this was my first impression of old school RuneScape. Before I even started playing, I had an important decision to make. Iron Man or not Iron Man? Iron Man basically means you're self-sufficient and can't buy items off of the game's market, main player market anyway, the Grand Exchange, or trade with other players at all. Unless, of course, you're going into a group Iron Man in which you can trade between each other. Having never played before, the lack of knowledge just kind of made it daunting, and I wanted to actually see and experience as much of the game as possible. But I also didn't really want to risk knowing myself, going to the Grand Exchange and just buying a bunch of powerful items and then kind of just mowing through things and not really getting an authentic experience. It felt like it would prevent me from getting to know or understand OSRS. So I made sort of a self-compromise. I decided to play non-Iron Man, but effectively just use the Grand Exchange to purchase items or accept trades with players with mostly common items, things that were not going to be game-breaking in any sense. I didn't want to feel more motivated to farm gold than to be out skilling or doing quests. So I've been using it mostly for resources like runes and arrows. And even then, I explored options that experienced players might know more about, and I'll talk about that throughout the video. So with that decided, I trekked through Tutorial Island and made my first steps into Gelinor. Starting off, I approached the game with little to no direction. Chat kept trying to tell me to do all sorts of things. Go do waterfall quests, you're wasting your time leveling your attack stat, or go do this for some early hit points, etc. But I didn't even fundamentally understand the game yet, so I opted to ignore all of those people and stick close to Lumbridge and do the quests there, killing cows for cowhides and chickens for feathers. I took the opportunity to fish, mine, craft, and do a handful of nearby quests throughout the nearby cities. So this allowed me to discover one of my favorite things as a new player, in that of paths. When you're a new player and you tell the game that you're new when prompted, the game gives you some bonuses for reaching certain skill breakthroughs early: armor, weapons, resources, and a bit of gold. Most notable were some of the stabs that I got from leveling magic, stabs of air, fire, and earth. I was provided these, and it made my eventual descent into magic skilling go a lot easier. Not that these items would have been that hard to obtain otherwise, but just getting them this way was a nice little bonus instead of going to a vendor and buying them there. I appreciated these greatly, and if they decide to expand the new player experience at any point, paths is probably the way to do it. It's not like they couldn't add paths that do specific quest triggers to try to get people through some of the free-to-play quests or some of the high-end demand quests to give players some initial direction. I don't think it's necessarily needed, but if they were to do something, that'd probably be where I would look. So I progressed through the early parts of the game, focusing tons of time around Lumbridge, Draenor, and Varric. Apparently that's a pretty common thing for a new player. Eventually, though, I began to become curious about some of the quests people had been recommending and had already experienced some old school questing and knew that it was going to be quite the ordeal. The quests were actually pretty clear about what they wanted players to do as you went step to step. But I would have to go someplace, find out I didn't have an item, and then go all the way back to get it, and then come back. And I was just like, you know, I want to see more of the game, so I'm going to save some time on this front. I've already done this before. I've had a wiki page open on the second monitor for old MMOs like Final Fantasy XI before. I don't think I need to put myself through that here. So I had a second important decision to make. It was time to install Runelite. Or is it Runelite? Or is it a combination? Whatever, all the same. Runelite is, how do I put this? An officially supported third-party client for the game. Yeah, it's not like Jagex makes this, but on Jagex's launcher, it asks you if you want to launch the game in Runelite. So they like support it officially, but it's not theirs. It's just kind of a weird middle ground. Anyway, it allows for a lot of quality of life plugins to be used, including a quest helper, and a ton of other things. Trust me, I've definitely turned on a lot of plugins at this point. With this, I set out to do some new quests and quickly began figuring out that the game, I thought, was simply about going around and clicking and swinging your sword and casting a magic spell, was not going to be that the entire time. My first real revelation of this was in the Priests in Peril quest. At one point I was tasked with killing a giant guardian. It was way stronger than me, so I was pretty hesitant about doing it at all, especially because I got a warning that if I died in the dungeon, I'd lose all my items, and I really didn't want that. So I had to learn about something called safe spotting. Now in concept I understood it and had actually already been doing it. If you attack a monster and it's unable to actually physically get to you and has no ranged attacks, then you can just pick on it from range. It'll just sit away from you as you pelt it with magic or bow and arrow or whatever it is. It makes sense to me when you're hiding behind a bunch of boxes or there's like a tree in between you or something, but this was a wide open room, so I didn't understand how I was going to be safe spotting. Well, safe spotting has a few different ways of being done, one of which abuses the monster's hitbox and the game's method of determining a monster's vision of you. Monsters with big hitboxes could effectively be trapped against room corners. Apologies if I'm explaining this wrong, but it has something to do with their southwestmost hitbox tile being in vision of you, and monsters prioritizing moving west or east before moving north or south. So basically the monster could see me and wanted to move west, but couldn't because of the wall lip, and since it never finished moving west, it couldn't start moving south. Or something like that. Basically, you can still trap monsters in rooms like this, and it's not an abnormal thing. It's something that you should probably learn as you're playing the game. It was the first of many signs that the game was full of game knowledge that wasn't inherently earned from skilling or questing and had to be learned through game experience or exchange of knowledge from other players. That's super normal for older style games, so it's not like it's anything that was a surprise to me. But for such a simple game, I didn't expect tricks like this to be so prevalent in the game's experience. I figured things like this would be a one-off, but I know now that that's definitely not the case. I continued to abuse safe spotting in the more traditional ways as I farmed bones for prayer levels and leveled my magic on giants. This is something I felt was essential to ensuring my not Iron Man experience of seeing how Iron Man characters might do the same. This was especially true when I did waterfall quests and discovered fire giants. These giants drop rune scimitars. Now they're not very expensive, I could easily have afforded them off the Grand Exchange, they were only like 15,000 gold, and that's just a handful, that's like one inventory full of unicorn horns right outside of Eric or something like that. But I didn't want to just buy it off of the Grand Exchange. An Iron Man would have to safe spot these fire giants to try to get this rare drop in order to get an upgraded weapon and continue the game. So I wanted to put that skill that I learned to use, and so I decided to go and do the fire giants for my rune scimitar instead of doing something else. I don't know, I guess it's just really important to me that I see these parts of the game so that I understand that there are systems to progress throughout current old school RuneScape that don't just involve buy it off the Grand Exchange and then go do your next quest. However, it hadn't yet been tested on another skill, flinching. Flinching is kind of similar in the idea in that it's melee safe spotting. Basically, you step in and swing a weapon at an enemy, and before they strike you back, you step into a spot they can't follow. You let the HP bar above your head reset, and then step in and swing again, repeat until killed. There's a quest, Holy Grail, where this is actually sort of taught to the player, but isn't super required. I was actually doing it wrong for the first like 50% of the quest. I was just like stepping in, swinging, stepping out, stepping in like immediately. Like I wasn't waiting until the bar above my head disappeared because the enemy swings so slow that doing it incorrectly never meant being punished. But I did eventually learn how to go about doing it through this quest and through subsequent experiences. But now I had another skill, so I continued forth. At this point, I'd been skilling for quite a while through the early levels and had learned and experienced quite a few things. I'd slayed a demon threatening Varrock, I'd gotten a boy's ball back from a witch's experiment-ridden shed, reignited talks of peace between cave goblins and Lumbridge, saved a prince, etc, etc. I'd also begun exploring the game's simpler forms of content. I did some pest control, which is a little minigame where you destroy portals while defending a knight in the center with other players, and learned of Wintertot and Temperos, mini-boss events I knew I'd get to eventually. But it was time I finally completed RuneScape for my first impressions. I had to slay a dragon in the last free-to-play quest the game had. Yeah, RuneScape's technically free, but being a member is required for most of the game's event. Pretty much everything after Dragon Slayer, it's required. I am a member, but it felt like it was time to take on Elvarg, that's his name, right? And the free-to-play version would effectively be completed. While the quest provided me with a shield to help prevent his fire from obliterating me, there was one thing I wanted first. Protection prayers. These 3 prayers basically render certain types of attack harmless, depending on which one you activate, at the cost of rapidly reducing one's prayer meter. So I grinded on blue dragons, safe spotting of course, and sacrificed their bones to get to these prayers before heading to Elvarg and actually dying a couple of times. Yeah, my magic skill was cracked, so I decided to try this with melee and ranged, and lost because they just weren't nearly as good. Yeah, magic's really strong in early RuneScape, I also learned. There's elemental resistances, and when something's weak against the element, they basically disintegrate, so that is what happened to Elvarg when I came back. So yeah, once I came back with magic, I destroyed him, and bam, I had technically beaten free-to-play RuneScape. Having been introduced to protection prayers, I saw how much of the game's difficulty later on would likely involve these things. My chat had been saying, oh boy, here's protection prayers, welcome to the entire game, and I was like, wonder what they mean. My prayers were running out pretty quick. I guess you could bring a bunch of protection prayer potions, and then you could have protection prayers up for a much longer period of time, and I wonder what they mean. And then I started going to do some other quests and realizing that there was something I hadn't considered. A very simple application to the way that I was using protection prayers that probably would have helped me do Elvarg a lot easier the first time. And that was the idea of prayer flicking. So, it's kind of what it sounds like. You flick the prayers on and off depending on when you're actually being attacked instead of just leaving them on the entire time. This means that you can basically extend out the prayer bar for a much longer usage of time because your prayer only depletes when prayers have been active for a certain amount of time. So right before an enemy attacks, flick on your protection prayers and then flick them off again in just a matter of like less than half a second. And all of a sudden, what used to be 3 seconds and maybe 2 attacks worth of prayer protection becomes anywhere from 6 to 10 attacks, depending on how good you've actually become at this set system. You can also do the same for your outgoing attacks if you want to extend the use of those, and all of a sudden one bar lasting 36 seconds can last you 5 to 10 minutes because you're flicking it on and off between any of your own attacks. Prayer flicking, I can tell, is going to be one of the most essential skills when I want to start getting into more important things. I expect to have to know it very well for some of the early to mid-game bosses, things like Scurious, for example, but this is another essential skill. And I think the key that I was learning as I learned about the safe spotting with the move west and south, and I was learning about flinching and this prayer flicking and all these gameplay elements, was that sometimes something can be really simple on the surface, but just have so much layers of depth behind it that can definitely lead to player frustration, and you kind of wish it didn't have to be that way, but it also gives the game its own kind of unique charm that you can appreciate from time to time. It meant that what I thought was going to be a simple click and move experience became something that I actually had to learn, and I had to expand my expectations of what the game would challenge me with in various ways. So while this was a pretty early, these are all really early things, nothing here is even close to a mid-game. I'm not even remotely close to anything that would resemble a mid-game, regardless of slaying Elvarg or doing all these things that sound like they're pretty cool and unique. It barely scratches the surface of what old school RuneScape has in store for me. And I do continue to keep learning about those things and keep expanding my game knowledge to understand them to the best of my ability. Now, I've spent a lot of this video kind of talking about my progression and experiences learning game systems and going around and doing questing and trying to find all these unique little quirks. There's some core aspects of the game I kind of need to double back on and talk about a bit. Because, as mentioned, you do go around skilling up a bunch of things. I've done woodcutting, fire making, crafting, mining, fishing. While I made brief mention of these, I didn't really mention about how integral they are to the game's experience. A lot of quests require you to have these skills leveled, or at the very least encourage it to make certain parts easier, whether that's being a higher agility level in order to use a shortcut, or having a high enough thieving skill to get the item that's actually required to complete the quest. And then quests themselves tend to actually reward points for these things. You know, like I said, people are recommending me to do waterfall quests because it would give me a ton of attack and strength levels right off the bat. And then that would allow me to go and do a bunch of other things. But that's kind of the core aspect of the game, is that every single skill up that you get is something that's helping you progress through the other quests and is unlocking features for you. Basically, every piece of content you do is giving you some long form amount of quality of life. For example, when I completed all of the diaries in the city of Ardoon, which I call Ardugny because it upsets people, I was able to earn a cape that allowed me to teleport to it, but I could also raise cats and exchange them for death runes, which I could use for magic, which was a nice little thing to add in. I could go ahead and complete my easy combat diary, and that will increase the amount of points I get from pest control, which will save me time later down the line when I'm working on my ranged armor set for the Void and Elite Void set. I guess my point is that all of the game's systems are intertwined, so your progression feels really good no matter which progression it actually is. There is a limit to that, of course. Realistically, the first 60 to 70 levels in any of the skill feel pretty okay, and then they start to slow down after that. In case you're wondering about how long it takes to actually skill any individual skill, let's just say that 92 out of 99 is technically the halfway point. It's about 13 million EXP to skill level 99, and you get to about 6.5 million at level 92. So yeah, and when you start getting into the upper levels, you really got to buckle down and see if you want to actually go through that, but that doesn't make the first 60 or 70 levels really any bad, which means that you're constantly progressing and getting to know these systems quite efficiently when you're a brand new player or playing on a brand new character. And as such, I think that's where a lot of the charm in old school RuneScape is. It's in the fact that everything you do affects everything else that you do, and that's just kind of a satisfying gameplay loop to have. Now, that doesn't mean it's for everyone. At the end of the day, it is a lot of point and click and read, and it's a very, as it says, old school game. So while it tugs on a bit of nostalgia strings for some, I have to say that the core aspects of the game itself make it a really fun experience. And again, there's so much that I haven't even done yet that it's hard for me to really even give you the full perspective of it. All I can say is that I'm kind of glad I waited till now to try old school RuneScape. I don't know if it would have survived my attention when I was playing a lot of the other games, when I was doing Final Fantasy XI throughout most of my youth, as I dabbled in these various other MMOs that were far more action heavy and spending my time with friends playing those instead of playing anything else. But I do also remember a giant group of 30 people all staying after school in the computer lounge to play RuneScape on the PCs there, because their PCs at home either were occupied by other people or just really couldn't run the game well enough because it was the early day of, the internet and online computers and being kind of normal in people's homes. And now you can even just play something like this on your phone. So it's really easy to lose a lot of time to it and to throw the time into it as a whole. But it's been a good experience so far. I'll definitely be continuing it. I've kind of stopped streaming it because stream-wise, it just wasn't doing super well, even if I was having fun. But I plan to continue to expand my experience. Right now, I'm working on 99 fire making and winter taught. Yes, I am hoping for the minion. No, I have no hope of getting it. But you never know, I still have about 8.5 levels to go before I'll be done with that. And that is the majority of the experience. And with that, those cover my first impressions of old school RuneScape. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you want to know about my future experiences with old school RuneScape, let me know in the comment section of the video below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.